You ever find yourself just completely frustrated by someone? A terrible boss, maybe, or a politician you just can't stand, and you think, how can they be so clueless? Well, today we're going to dive into a mental model that says you might be asking the completely wrong question. It's called ecological thinking, and yeah, it's all about why you should hate the game, not the player. We've all heard this, right? It's usually just some throwaway line. But what if it's not? What if it's actually the key to a super powerful way of looking at the entire world? That's what we're doing today. We're taking this idea and turning it into a serious tool for understanding how things really work. And this really gets to the heart of it. See, our default setting is what you could call story thinking. We're basically hardwired to look for a hero and a villain. Our first question is always, okay, who's to blame here? But ecological thinking, or systems thinking, it just flips that whole script. It forces you to look past the individual people and instead ask, wait a minute, what's the environment they're in? What are the rules of the game that are making them act this way? So to understand the game, you first have to see this invisible force that's pulling all the strings. Honestly, it's the single most important idea in this whole framework, and it's called the niche. So what exactly is a niche? Okay, think of it like a job opening that an environment creates all by itself. It's this abstract space, a specific role with its own set of incentives, just sitting there, waiting for someone to come fill it. The most important thing to get is that the niche exists whether or not anyone is actually doing the job right now. And this leads to two really mind-bending insights. First, these niches are baked into the DNA of the system itself, totally separate from any one person. But second, and this is the real game changer, they act like a vacuum. They create this constant pull, this almost magnetic attraction. If an environment has an opening for a certain kind of behavior, it is almost inevitable that someone will eventually get pulled in to fill it. The niche demands to be filled. All right, so that's the theory. Kind of abstract, I know, but what does this actually look like in the real world? Let's check out a few examples that really make this whole idea click. Okay, here's a complaint you hear constantly. Why is it always endless sequels, reboots, and the same superhero movies over and over? The story thinking answer is to just blame lazy producers, right? Or uncreative executives. But what does an ecologist see? They see that the niche for unoriginal but safe movies is actually carved out by, well, us, the audience. As a system, we consistently vote with our wallet. We pay to see the familiar franchises again and again. The studios, they're just the players in this game, responding rationally to this incredibly profitable niche that our collective behavior has created. You know, Steve Jobs had this fantastic quote about television, but it applies perfectly here. He said, it's not some big conspiracy to make people dumb. The system is just giving people exactly what they want. And, he added, that's a much more depressing thought. The game's rules are set by our dollars, and the players are just playing to win. Okay, let's take a more personal example. Every school has to deal with bullies, and the typical response is to zoom right in on the individual bully. But what happens if we look at the system instead? So, the common answer is all about the player. Punish the bully. But the ecological answer is about the game. Change the social dynamics of the peer group. So why do that? Because the niche for a bully doesn't just exist on its own. It's created and fed by the social rewards they get from their friends, the laughter, the attention, the validation. If you can change the game so the peer group stops giving that reward, the niche itself just vanishes. It dries up. Nobody wants to fill a role that has zero payoff. All right, now for a much more complex system. Economic cycles can feel totally random and chaotic, but from an ecological point of view, they have a weird kind of logic to them, and we can understand it using this incredible analogy from biology. So it's this idea from biology called Bayesian mimicry, and it maps onto finance almost perfectly. Here's how it works. Step 1. A genuinely new, valuable investment appears. That's the model. Step 2, its success creates a niche for mimics. These are the knockoff, cheater investments that just copy the surface-level stuff to look real. Step 3, the investors or the dupes can't tell the difference and start pouring money into these mimics. And finally, step 4, the whole system gets flooded with these worthless fakes, it becomes unstable, and you get a crash. The boom itself actually creates the niche for the bust. So look, understanding niches is cool, but its real power isn't actually solving problems. Because if you want a different outcome, you can't just keep swapping out the players and hoping for the best. You have to actually reform the game. Let's start with a classic, office politics. Everybody hates it. The typical solution is to try and get rid of the really political people. But we all know that almost never works for long. So an ecologist would stop and ask what conditions in our company are creating a niche for political behavior in the first place. Politics loves secrets, right? It thrives in ambiguity. So to shrink that niche, you change the rules of the game. You increase transparency, you make communication better, and you make sure leadership roles are clearly defined and filled. You basically make politicking a really ineffective strategy for getting ahead. Now let's try to apply this to a much bigger, much tougher societal problem. When we see drug-related violence, our gut instinct is to blame the dealers. They're the players, right? But the niche for selling drugs exists for one reason: user demand. That's just a feature of the system. Now, by making it illegal, we don't actually get rid of the niche. We just make it incredibly risky and way more profitable. And think about it. What kind of person is attracted to a high-risk, high-reward illegal job? Someone who's either desperate or ruthless or both. The violence isn't just a property of the players, it's a property of the dangerous niche that the game itself has created. So if you really want to solve the violence, you have to change the entire game. Now, the source material suggests one ecological solution could be to reframe the whole problem, to stop treating drug abuse like a criminal issue and start treating it like a public health issue. That doesn't eliminate the demand for drugs, but it fundamentally changes the characteristics of the niche. And when you do that, you change the kind of player it attracts. So where does all this leave us? Well, this isn't just some interesting theory. It's a practical tool for your own thinking. It's a new lens you can put on to look at almost any complex problem you come across. So this is the big mindset shift. Stop just focusing on the players and asking, who can I blame? Start looking for those invisible niches that are shaping behavior all around you, and then ask the most powerful question: how can I change the game to get a better outcome? Now, this doesn't mean people aren't responsible for what they do. Of course they are. But it recognizes that if you want to create real, lasting change, reforming the system is the most powerful lever you have. So I'll just leave you with this question to chew on. Think about that difficult boss or that frustrating politician, or maybe even a pattern in your own behavior. What if you've been looking at a player when you should have been looking at the game?